So let's go back in, same image. We're going to actually attack this a completely different way. So what I'd like to do right now, both of actually controlling the skin adjustment on here. I'd like to put them together at the same time. So, oh, sorry, you guys can't see anything. Okay, so top adjustment selected, hold down the and highlight. So both of these now have been are selected. You can tell they're both highlighted. Come up to the drop-down menu that's right here, and you want to go New Group from Layers. If you do that, the dialog box will open up, and we're going to call this Curve. Curve. Good to go. Okay, so the next way we're going to do that, go ahead and turn back down to that. Fine, it works great. Won't be a and come in close. Is the worst of the sun at something that's roughly right. George, I think you were the Q center. Is that true? Yeah. So you would go to this. So in the drop down menu here, you would go to red and do what? So we'll for what it I want you to. It's important that you take a look at our screen right now. So this has come on. It's actually got the master. And so what if you click on the menu, you can see it's those same range of colors that are collective. Of this palette. But these actually we're talking about here is if you look at this top line, this top sort of rainbow line right here, it's actually showing you how hue is mapped to, so this is before and this is after. So just like a curve, it's input and output. And right now they're identical to one another. So anytime it's asking for any of these colors right here, it's actually being mapped to the exact same color down here. You can shift these things, which is what we're going to actually use to fix this guy. However, you can also grab simply a very small specific range of this to change, because the truth of it is, I only want to change this red sunburn part. I don't want to change any other color. I don't want to change the color of the top. I don't want to change the color. I don't want to change any other color except for that specific sunburn area. So you can be extremely tighter in the range that you pick than simply picking reds. You can see there's a slider that comes right up here in the middle of this range, and what this slider is indicating to you, let me do this on screen, you can see it on the video. What this slider is actually indicating right here is that Okay. Three eyedroppers here that are all picked first. And I'm going to come. The other thing you'll notice you want to know about this space that is happening between these two bars in the center. Up in here. Impacted 100% complete. However, the distance between one of these bars and that little triangle, this is a ramp down. The happening right where this bar is at that's what's going on. So in looking at what's really happening here, or the illusion that'll be up on the whiteboard that's really happening, is the area that's between the two bars. So here's the bar here, and here's the bar here, and then it goes to this thing that's supposed to look like a sort of like a little, I don't know, it looks like a little triangle here, and there's another one over here. It's like this. So what happens is that the stuff into here is 100% impacted. So if I do a hue shift, 100% of that is impacted here. As you start to go from here down to here, though, it ramps down. And at this stage down here, it's 0%. And then anything outside here, all of this is at 0%. None of this is being affected. This is completely out of the range. And then the other thing happens here. This ramps down to 0% down here. And then everything on this range right here is 0%. Make sense? Okay, you can change these things. You can manually adjust them. They're mobile. So you can actually click on, I'm going to click on one of the lines right here. You can see you can also tighten up how the ramp down works. You can extend the ramp down so that it actually affects more range. You can actually change the entire slider up and down for the entire range. So you can change all of these things. All these variables are actually being able to be changed. If you've actually screwed your bottom down here up as much, notice it takes you back and just so you remember the area that's down here that I said we don't need? Watch it. The range gets tighter. What impacting this color skin tone at all, it's really going to be pretty much restricted to this. This is a huge shift. So some green that's actually
layer saturation resets. Or I can double check, maybe it's just the view resets.
go through it again. No, go back in history and let's just see what happens. So go back right before you set it. So that's before you threw it away. Everything here is set. That part's correct. So then click on the guy and throw it up.
So I think maybe it's just this went back to master, my view here.
How did you just throw away that layer though?
I put it in here.
No, but you just did a keyboard shortcut to get rid of it. So again, come over here and click on the guy and drag it down to the trash. And then click on your normal guy up here. Yeah, that. Huh. Maybe Photoshop reset. Because that should not be happening because your range still should be narrow. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So you can go back to your reds again. Go back to your reds, drop down, because that's still got that part in there.
It does still have it.
Yeah, and you've got your minus eyedropper, so I would simply click on the minus eyedropper really quick. Click on her body. Yeah, and then you'll be good to go. Okay, so I feel like I've got here reasonably well color back on this. How did that happen? Kick. Check. Test. Restrict this even more. We still got a layer mask that's actually sitting here. me. Do the very same trick that I did. I'm going to add another curve to this. I need to lighten this up still a little bit more. I'm actually going to go from a normal blending mode to screen, which I'm going to invert this mask, Command I, and then I'm going to drop the flow of my brush back down again to that 2 or 3% range. That's where it was working. That part was working pretty well for me. And then again, with painting white on this layer, I'm simply going to come in to try to lighten those parts up. Maybe a little bit right in there, a little bit more right in there. And this is now my shift here, and that part's actually worked out really pretty well. And it's seriously drop-down menu right here and say new group from layers. We're going to call this hue sat. So this is my hue sat one. And again, it needs a little bit more work, but if I even move in closer, you'll see there's another problem that I've got. And the other problem I've got here, this is the method. As you can see, because we have this in there, that doesn't happen in the hue sat version of it. In the hue sat version of it, because it's targeting those colors that happen. It's just a curve. I'm going to throw it away first. So I've got this is the hue sat layer that I've got going right here. That's right. I feel like that the area. The tan line, the part of down here is actually, it's really light. The area is light, but I still feel like I've got a dark area in here. So if I'm trying to blend this all a little bit more, I've got a light part up right here. You don't. But way too light. Did that work? Then the mask that's controlling that, I'm going to invert the mask. You don't mask. All of that color up. Back out a little bit.
Is this a pretty common request? Or like
yeah. Stands like that. You'll see, I think we maybe have had this conversation before. You'll see professional models all day long do this. And it's because all the blood is rushing to, you can see I've got junky veins, all the blood rushes to the, and so this ends up being much redder than my, well, that's hard to believe. It's hard to believe that any part of me is redder than my face, but nonetheless it is, or it is in a lot of people. It's usually darker as well. This is usually tan on it, where, so people are really good at block on their face and then not about their arms. Legs become even worse. So color. And this is how they do it. Questions about the built-in microphone? Check, check. Okay. So part of that last video, again, you're going to miss because there's my microphones are not happy today. I mean, weren't happy yesterday, so we'll see. Okay. So there's a file that I need everybody to open, and this should work out pretty good. I think we can probably get through this in the next 45 minutes, and we'll take a break for lunch, and then we'll come back and get into some serious compositing work. So that's the phase that we're going into now. The way I think things are going to work, guys, I can see right now, I can't promise this, but it seems like we're better on track. If we look at where we're at on our schedule right now, and our session number 12 is supposed to be Friday. So right now we're in this 10 part right here. I think I can get through all of this and we will hit skin recoloring, and yeah, we should be pretty good. I think I can pull all of this together between today and next and Friday, and then we will be back on schedule. So session 13 is next Monday, and we go into the other sort of components of this class. We're going to move away from retouching. We're going to move into more branding, printing. We're going to confront all those issues, and that will be the last third of this class. So that's the plan, anyway. Okay, so the file that I need you guys to open right now. So we are going to be working out of class number 10 right now. So the folder that I need you to open up for me really quickly is this one called Perspective. And then there's a file at the very top called 01-01 Perspective, if you could open that up for me. And again, this is a file that was created by Jesus Ramirez. He did an entire, it was like a box set of something for compositing. Most of what we are going to look at in here, I'm going to get the meat of all of that, and then we're going to actually look at other things in here. So if you double click on the hand to actually get this thing as big as it'll go, what you'll see here, and this is in a large part most of, Jesus Ramirez, one of the things that he does that I don't do a whole lot of, many of you guys do much 3D work? Yeah, I don't either. He does a huge amount of 3D work. And so this background, for instance, right here, this is a synthetic background that he's created. There's some figures that we're going to look at here in just a second that he's also created in 3D. And so what you're looking at here, just to help sort of orient you to this, is that basically you're looking at a ground plane that meets the sky. Does that sort of make sense? And the line right there, this line that's running right through here, the middle of whatever, represents the horizon line. So, and you can think of it exactly like the way horizons really work. So if we were to go out right now and look at the lake, you would actually be able to see the lake, and it would go out till it hits the sky. Those two will actually meet at a certain point. We call that the horizon line. And even though we all instinctively know that, defining that, really making that point and realizing that this is something that we have to focus on and deal with and establish becomes critical. Does that sort of make sense? Okay. So I'm going to start this off and tell you this just from the get-go to plant a seed at the beginning in your brains. Usually when you are looking at composite work and you feel like something is wrong, but you don't know what it is perspective. It is a mismatch of perspective. It is the hardest thing to understand in doing compositing work, but once you get it, and hopefully you will get it here, there is a whole set of tools that you will have to help build in, to help make compositing work right for you. Does that sort of make sense? All right, so that's what we're going to go through here and actually take a look at. So the very first thing I'm going to ask you guys to actually turn on, let me just see what happens here in the center of this image. Go ahead and, I'm going to open this up really quick. I don't think there's anything here. There's nothing in here that we're actually looking for. So you can click on the eyeball and close that up. These are color-coded. So then click on the eyeball for the red diagrams and actually click and open this guy up. And again, for me right now, I am going to get rid of my properties menu so that I've got a lot of room for my layers. If you guys want to do the same thing, it'll just make navigating in here easier. So I just went to my properties palette, grabbed it to pull the palette off, and then click the little close button. Here, I'll show you again. I'll just do it. All right, so to do this, click on the properties palette, tear the entire thing off. It'll give the layers palette all the room on the right side of your screen, and then simply click on the little X box at the very top to get rid of the properties palette. We're not going to use properties for this. So with the eyeball turned on next to the group of diagrams and expand it, so again, click on the expansion arrow here to simply expand it. Come down and click on the eyeball that's right across from cubes, and you'll see that there are 3 cubes that have actually been appeared on the sky. So 2 of these cubes are actually sitting on the ground plane, and 1 of these cubes is floating up in the air. And these are in perspective. How do I know that?
They're like lined up with the grid patterns.
Part of it is, yes, they are lined up with the grid pattern. That would actually make total sense. Katie, you go back to illustration drawer girl. You know perspective probably really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that comes up a lot of. Yeah, so how do you know?
So there's a vanishing point right in the middle.
Right. So we're going to look at exactly what Katie said. If you come down here, let me make this a little bit wider as well. If you come down here to, come down underneath these 3 cubes that are right here. Don't click on the free cube right now, but instead it's this thing that says Vanishing Point. I want you to click on that arrow right there. It's actually the wrong one. Come down to this Vanishing Point right here. So it's all the way almost down at the bottom, and click on Vanishing Points. And you'll actually see that it actually has put in these green lines. And the green lines, if you zoom in to take a look at this, if you zoom in, you'll see that the green lines, all they have done is they've traced a line that goes along the edges all the way back to its extension. And then they've done the same thing with this edge right here and the same thing with the bottom. And at a certain point, those 3 lines converge to a single point. And that single point is called the vanishing point. And what we are now looking at is a single point vanishing point perspective. Does that make sense to everyone? What you should also notice is that in this, because it is a single point perspective, all of these cubes converge at the same perspective point. They all land on a single point back here. If you then come up and hit on the free cube one, so click on the free cube one right here and click on this guy, you will then also see, let me make my window just a little narrower. On this point right here, if you click on its vanishing point as well, you'll actually see that it too, it doesn't converge at the same point right here, but those lines do converge back here on the horizon line. And to see the horizon line, come down here to the very bottom and simply click on the horizon line. And what happens in things that are in perspective is that their vanishing points will always fall on the horizon line. Does that make sense? And to see what that means, click on the free cube itself to actually make this layer active. Hit the V key to get the move tool and click and drag this thing up. Turn off its vanishing point. Does that seem correct? No. It looks wrong. Does that look wrong? Look at it. Let's go back in space. Hit Command-Z to undo that. Doesn't that seem grounded on the ground plane? It's laying on the ground plane. But this does not. And the reason it's not is because it's no longer in perspective. Its vanishing point now sits up above the horizon line, and that would be impossible. Is this making sense, all you guys? Are there questions about this so far? Well, I hope not, because this is going to get a lot deeper right now. You can close off the diagram, not close off the diagram, close off the one-point perspective eyeball, leave the diagrams on. We need to come down here to, there's another folder down here that says two-point perspective. If you click on two-point perspective, you will actually see examples of blocks now that would have 2 points of perspective. And so you can think of these like, imagine that you're standing at the corner of a building. So this is the front of the building, this is the side of the building. That's what a two-point perspective actually is. Two-point perspectives, if you go ahead and open up its folder right here and scroll down, you can actually turn on its vanishing lines, and you will see that again, if you trace the edges of these cubes out to the point where they converge, where they meet, this is a vanishing point for this space. There's another vanishing point for this space over here. However, both of these vanishing points still fall on the horizon line. So again, you can click on the horizon line here to see it bisects both of those vanishing points. And again, it doesn't matter whether it is down on the ground, whether it's floating up in the air, or whether it's really up in the air. All of these are in perspective because their true vanishing point, their vanishing point lines are actually hitting and converging all at the same place, which is how it would have to be. Does this make sense, everyone? Okay. You can turn off two-point perspective and finally click on three-point perspective and open it up as well. This is an example of a three-point perspective, and what you can imagine this as being is just a cube that's floating in the air, and you're actually able to see three faces of it. You've got two faces that are right here, and the third face that's actually sitting on the bottom. This is also in perspective, but it gets a little trickier with this one. If you click on its vanishing lines, what you see is that 2 out of the 3 will always fall on the horizon line, but the third of the vanishing points floats up in the air in this case. So in this case, again, you can sort of imagine the scenario that we've actually got going here. This is a building or a cube that's actually floating up in space. This is our ground plane, and this is the air up in here. Does that make sense, everyone? So then I need everyone to go to their image menu, come down to, I'm sorry, the it's the image menu. Come down to image rotation, and I want you to rotate this 180 degrees. Now what we've got is what would happen if you were actually flying in a helicopter looking down on a building top. The horizon, so this is now our sky, this is now the ground, the horizon now would actually be up above the sky. So doesn't this have the appearance that you're looking down on a three-dimensional object? Again, the vanishing points still land on the horizon line, but now because we're looking down, if you imagine you're in a helicopter looking down a building that's on the lake horizon line is up above the building. Does that make sense? All of this is what is defining perspective for us. Are we good on this part? All right. You can actually turn this off. Every time I look up at you guys, actually go ahead and rotate it back again for me so you can go back in time to unrotate that canvas. Every time I look at you guys, it seems like the look on your face is getting progressively more worried. It's like, okay, don't worry, we're going to get through this. It's going to make sense, I hope. I know. You can close up the three-point perspective line right now. You can actually collapse all these guys to give us a little bit more room. And the last one I want you to click on is the top to bottom boxes. And go ahead and open this guy up. So with the top to bottom boxes, what you'll see happen here is this. Because the horizon line is running right through here, if you look at the top of the boxes, you will actually see what you can truly see of the box changes depending on its perspective. So the box that's all the way down, the lowest on the ground, you can see the most of the top of that box, right? The one that's up a little bit higher, you see less of the top. The one that is almost up at the horizon line, you see just a sliver of its top. But the minute you go up above the horizon line, you don't see the top anymore. You begin to see the bottom of the box. And as you continue all the way up here to the one that's the very highest up, you see the most of the bottom of the box. Does that sort of make sense? All right. I want you to then, there's a picture of a car right here. I want you to turn this eyeball on. Is that car in perspective? Does it look wrong? It definitely looks wrong. How could we know for certain that it is not in perspective? Henry's exactly right. If this was truly in perspective, you would be able to see the bottom of the car. You would not see the top. You would be seeing the bottom. That's not the case here. If we look at this car, I actually see at the very, very top of this car, I barely see just the very top edge of this. I can see just a little bit of the top of that. It's not much, but a little bit. Select the car layer to make it active. Hit the V key to get the move tool, and then simply bring this car down. And what I want you to do is bring it till it drops just below the horizon line. This car is now in perspective, and it's grounded in the ground plane, and this looks right. Now again, if you hit Command Z and float it back up again, you look at this and you go, there's no way, this is not real, this can't be. I don't maybe know what's causing me to feel that way, but I know this does not look right. But then if we drop it down again, it is now in perspective because the top edge of the car that we are seeing right now pretty closely mirrors the amount of the top edge of the box we're seeing. If it were to go slightly above the horizon line, you wouldn't see any of this. If it were to go down further, so actually drag this car down even further, and you'll see it goes back out of perspective. Bring it all the way down like this. Is that in perspective? No. Is there, how do you look at it and you go, well, no, there's something about that's not quite right. And again, it's subliminally, we all know that this is out of perspective. Does this make sense? Are we good on this part? Okay. Cursor, please get me away from boxes and illustrations. You can scroll up and you can actually turn off the eyeball for diagrams, and you can collapse the entire red set. And click on the green button for the one that's next to the group that says People, and we're going to go ahead and drop this open. So again, this is a 3D model that's actually been drawn, and if we take a look at this, this man actually is in perspective. But the things that I want you to notice about this are this specifically. Is where the horizon line cuts through the man. And you can actually see that the horizon line is cutting through right in this area. It's coming right through sort of just right above or just right below kind of where his collar is actually going down. There's a line that sort of goes through right in this area right here. So if we scroll down to the bottom of this, let me move out a little bit so I can get to my scroll bars. If you come all the way down to the bottom, you can see it's the man number 1 at the very bottom is the one that's actually turned on. If you click on the eyeball that's actually next to it, man number 2, you can see it is a figure that is about the same size. It's actually supposed to be a copy of this guy. But you'll notice that he is smaller and he is further back in space. But look where the horizon line bisects him. The horizon line, when people are in perspective, people who are about the same height, no matter where they are in space, will bisect always at the exact same spot. So this guy, you know he is in perspective because the horizon line is bisecting him again right below, sort of in that, mid-chest area. Does that make sense, everyone? We good on this? You can click on man number 3, and you'll actually see way back in the back. I'm going to move this over just a little bit so you can see there's a guy all the way back here. Again, same size guy, but you also see the horizon line is bisecting him at exactly the same spot. That places him in perspective. If that was off, if it was different, he would not be in perspective, and you would feel like something here is wrong. Does this make sense, everyone? Okay. If we do the next one here, where you've got a guy who's actually, it's the same guy, but he is actually squatted down. He too is in perspective, but you'll notice that the horizon line does not bisect him any longer through his shoulders. And the reason is that 6'1" man that is standing up is now crouched down to a 3'5" guy who's now squatted down. So he is in perspective. Scale-wise, he is the same size as the guy that's actually standing up, but it does not bisect him in the same spot. However, if you go to squat guy number 2, you will notice that the squat figures all have the same amount of space above them, relatively speaking, in the distance from their body to the horizon line. So even if you go to squat number 3, a person who is squatting down in perspective will never, no matter how far they go back, they will never go up above the horizon line. That will never happen. If it does, they're not in perspective and your comp is wrong. Make sense? Keep going up, click on woman number 1. If you click on woman number 1, you will see that she's standing very close to the same, she's about the same distance, not exactly, but about the same distance from the camera as the guy is. However, the horizon line is bisecting her right at her shoulders, which is a little bit lower than the guy. Why is that? I mean, higher than the guy. Why is that? Exactly. She's shorter. If you add woman number 2, she is still in perspective because you can see where this is bisecting her sort of right along the shoulder line. That's the same thing that's happening to her right here. That again, no matter any distance that you actually go from here, you will actually, if she is in perspective, it will bisect her at the same spot. If you scroll up in here, one more that we need to do, or a couple, one last one we need to do. I'm going to click on this part, and this woman is in perspective, but the horizon line is not actually bisecting her at her shoulder line right now. Why? Because she's taller. She's standing on top of a box, but she is still in perspective. Does this all make sense to you guys? Okay, a couple things that I need everyone to do right now, because otherwise this is going to go horribly wrong. So let me get my note for this really quick. There is a couple of things that have changed in Photoshop that we need to unchange, and I need to find my cheat sheet. That's right here. So there's some changes that I need you guys to make, otherwise things will not work quite as well in doing this kind of work. So we need to return Photoshop to some of its legacy behavior. So Jose, I think you're still working on an older version of Photoshop. You don't need to worry about making these changes because your version of Photoshop will work exactly the way it's supposed to do. But for those of you who are on the latest, greatest, there's some certain things we need to change. So for instance, when we've been doing the transforming before, I have my reference point always shows up. In some of you guys, your reference point is not showing up. And then also in some of you guys, when you actually are doing transforms, you don't have to hold down the shift key any longer to transform in ratio. That's an old behavior. It gets really confusing in this. So I'm going to ask you, at least for this work right now, we go back to the old behavior of Photoshop, okay? Because otherwise there's some shortcuts here that are not going to work. So to do that, come up to the Photoshop menu and come down to Preferences and over to General. I think that's my first one here.
Should we reset our workspace first, or
you don't. No, you don't need to. No, you don't need to. You're going to be fine right now. We'll reset it in just a second. But in this general workspace, you need to check this Use Legacy Free Transform. And what that'll do is it'll take it back to the old behavior of Photoshop, so that when you are doing a transform and you grab one of your corner points and you start changing the width, it used to be that you would have to hold down the shift key to actually have that also change the height, and that's the, so we do want that part to actually be there. The next one I want you to do is come down to Tools, Tools, and in Tools at the very bottom, this Show Reference Point when using Transform. That's critical to our work in perspective. Yes? If it doesn't have any of those, you're working in an earlier version of Photoshop, and hopefully you won't need them. Hopefully this behavior already happens. And then finally, it's this one right here. You're trying to check this Show Reference Point when using Transform. Are we good on that? Okay, you can go ahead and say OK to that. And then one last one. Come up to the Edit menu. down to keyboard shortcuts. And for those of you who do not want to, who are hating the idea that Command Z now goes all the way back in time instead of alternating back and forth, this is where you can click on this legacy here. So use legacy undo shortcuts. If you use that, Command Z goes back one step in history. Command Z again goes forward one step. If you want to go back and back and back and back and back, it's Command Option Z. If you don't like that behavior, if you want to do the new version, because this is brand new that they've done, that it didn't require Command Option Z, you don't need to check this. This won't have any impact on what we're doing for our perspective work, but it'll have a huge impact. But the other two have a huge impact. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK to this. So this is the part that I wanted to show you about this. If you can do me a favor and turn off everybody except for the original guy. So I'm simply going to click on all of these eyeballs and come all the way down to the original guy, and I'm going to click on him to actually make him active. So you can transform in perspective, and that is something that we do in compositing all the time. This is the key to making your composite work well or be believable. To composite in perspective, you do this. So with the guy layer selected, everybody else turned off, hit Command T, which will bring up the transform dialog box. This is now showing you should have that reference point sitting right in the middle. This guy right here should be sitting there. Does everybody have that reference point? You want to click this reference point and drag it out and put it on the horizon line. So all of the work that we are going to do when we talk about doing transforming in perspective is our first job is to find the horizon line, and our second job is to do this. You put this reference point on the horizon line. And then we are going to come down here. I'm going to do this with the lower left-hand corner because I put my reference point back on the right side. You'll see what this means. I'm going to do every single version of this for you. But if you hover over this reference, the corner transform point right here, hold down your Shift key and your Option key both. And click and drag. You are now transforming in perspective. You will see that even if I get all the way this far back, that horizon line is still bisecting this guy in the exact same spot. Now again, because I put the reference point on the right side and clicked on that left-hand corner part, it's actually taking him to that reference point. Does that sort of make sense? However, he doesn't need to stay at that reference point. If you go ahead and hit your the check mark to commit this, you can move him anywhere you want in this space. So for instance, you can't move him up and down, but you can move him left and right because he will remain in perspective. Hit the V key to get the move tool. Hold down the Shift key so that it restricts your movements. It'll only allow you to go either left or right or up or down. In our case, we're simply going to click and drag him to the left. He is still in perspective over here. Is this working for everyone? Yes.
It's option and
Oh.
not shift. Mine's option.
Really?
Yeah, they changed that.
It is, because in mine it's still shift. Yet again, a bunch of engineers at Adobe who don't have anything better to do than to fuck with what has always worked. Because it's really so much different to hold down the shift key than the option key. Oh, I know, the one that we've been doing for 35 years, let's just change it. It's a good idea. Does this make sense, everyone? Okay, if you've done all this, again, because you've changed your undo now, Command Option Z once, Z again to bring him back up to the beginning. Does this make sense? We're going to do the same trick again, Command T to transform him. This time we're going to actually put the reference point on the other side, but still on the horizon line. And then again, I'm simply going to hold down Shift, Option, click on the lower right-hand corner, and I am now transforming in perspective. Make sense? So the trick to all of this and where this comes into us for compositing is once we get someone in a space that we know is truly in perspective, we can then put them anywhere in our scene and they will still be in perspective. Okay, you can uncheck the eyeball by the people and you can collapse the green group right here, and we can turn on the purple one and go to samples. And I'm going to click and drop this thing open. I am going to reset my space now. So again, come up to the window menu and come down to Workspace, and then down to reset your workspace, and it'll reset your panels the way they really should be. Double click on the hand to actually center this in the middle. So is this guy in perspective? When you look at this, does this feel right? No, it does not feel right. Again, this is what I keep trying to tell you guys. If you were seeing a situation and you say there's something that doesn't feel right, I don't really know what it is, 9 times out of 10, it is perspective. So let's figure out what's going on right here. Where is the horizon line of the beach? It's at the top of the photo. It's where the water meets the sky. That's where the horizon line is, right? We all know God. If you guys don't know this, we are in deep trouble. Are we good on this part? All right. If you come into this group down here, in the sample group down here, you'll have, again, the samples that are opened up. There's a group that just says man in here. If you click to open up the man, you will actually see, I'm going to drag my layer a little bit to the side again so you can see it on my screen. You will see that the guy's actually being masked. The guy's in his own scene. If you hold down, so has everybody found the guy with the mask? Are we good? Hold down the shift key and click on the mask. It gets rid of it. Where is the horizon line now? Way lower. It actually is right, wouldn't you say it's pretty much just above his kneecap? Now, we could draw a guideline down there, but I'm just going to say, let's just remember that the horizon line on the guy is right above his kneecap. Does this seem correct? He is in perspective in this. Does that sort of make sense? So, okay, so we know where the horizon line for him is. So again, hold down your shift key and click on that mask again to get it to go away, and come down and click on the beach scene. So make the beach scene active. Hit the V key to get the move tool, and then come up here to the top. Let's go ahead and do a guide. We'll just do a guide here for the very beginning. So hold down the shift key and get rid of the mask again one more time. We're going to simply click and drag a line down. So again, if you don't have your rulers showing, click on Window and come down to, I'm sorry, not Window, View, and come down to check rulers so that they are showing, because this was what you have to have your rulers to drag out guides. So with the rulers showing, click on the ruler and drag down, and we can put a guide right on where the horizon line is for the guide. Did that work? Okay, hold down the shift key and click on the mask again so it goes away. Now we know where the horizon line should be. Click on the beach to make the beach active. Hit the V key to get the move tool. And then again, I'm going to restrict my movement only to going up and down. So for me, it's holding down the shift key. For you, half of you guys, it's holding down the option key. But I'm simply going to click and drag down to the horizons till they match. So I'm bringing this down to the point that it actually matches. If you have trouble getting it in perfect, you can actually use your arrow keys to do that. If you want to then get rid of the line temporarily so that you don't see it, simply hit Command H. Doesn't this seem a whole lot more believable? The guy is now in perspective. Again, use Command Z to go back and forth. Wrong on every level. Right. Henry, that doesn't look, that's not the expression of somebody that it's working with. So yeah. What's going on?
You kind of lost me once you like.
Okay, so we have this horizon line, right? You know it's right above his knees, right? Yeah. Okay, so go ahead and click just on your ruler and just drag. Okay, so you have a straight line. Yeah, so that's the line where it's supposed to be. Okay, so fine. So then, hold on your key and click on the mask again. And then come down to your beach, and the B key, we're going to move it. And just start to drag it straight down. You're dragging the whole guy. And just the beach. Here, I'll show you why. I'm going to show everybody why. Move your whole thing down just a little bit. You've got auto select turned on, that's why. So if you move this whole window down, you need to drag. So guys, everybody should know this part. So what's happening with Henry when he's trying to move his thing right now? He's like here on the beach. Let me undo the beach and bring it back up. He had auto select turned on, and when he actually clicks on the beach and actually starts to drag it down, the V key, he's dragging on the image and dragging everything down. It was selecting his person as well and dragging that down. And I just told him to turn his auto select off. It's not doing it on mine, but again, it seems like all our computers have a mind of their own. So again, is that working for you now, though, Henry?
Yeah, but he's like huge now. He looks like a giant.
Well, but again, simply hold down the Option key and click on him right here and get rid of the layer mask. Doesn't he look huge there? Yeah. He is in perspective. And there's no way to really know whether he's huge or not because the beach doesn't have anything in it. Do we have any idea? Again, let me put him back again. So when you say he's huge, it's simply the perspective. There's nothing on the beach that we know of that's of any real size. Do we know, are the little rocks on there, are they the size of marbles? Are they the size of boulders? We don't have any, there's no scale reference here. We don't know. So even though he seems huge, he is in perspective. Did this work for everyone? Are we good on this part? All right. Turn off the beach really quickly for me. You'll see the guy just floating in air, and turn on the city, the eyeball for the city. Is this guy in perspective? Yeah, we're going to say close enough for government work, right? Because you can see the horizon line that we drew for him is almost identical to the horizon line of the city. However, we can actually transform this guy in perspective. If I were to pull this guy right up next to the camera, right up next to me, what would happen to him? He'd be larger. Would I see the top of his head? Would I see the bottom of his feet? Not if I pulled him there close enough. So we can see how this works. Again, come up to the guy, make sure that the guy layer is actually active and selected. Command-T to bring up the transform dialog box, and you'll see we've actually got a huge dialog box that's around this because it's actually circling the entire part of the guy, but that part's okay. I can still do the same thing. I'm going to click and put this point out here. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I'm going to undo my transform by clicking on the circle with the little arrow. I'm going to go to my pasteboard, hit the F key. If you're on the pasteboard, you will be able to find the handles that you need to control your transform with. And now do it. Command-T to bring up the dialog box. You'll see that the handles now exist. You can click on the reference point, drop it out here for the Empire State Building, next to the Empire State Building guy, whatever. Again, come to the corner point right down here, hold down Shift and Option and click. You can fly this guy out in space. Now, even though he's flying out in the middle of the air, he is still in perspective. Now, I don't believe that he can fly like that, but let's say you're doing a parachute. He's a parachute guy, and you're trying to actually float him down into the city. He would be in perspective here. But we wanted to go the opposite way. So again, I'm just going to hit Command-Z to undo that. I'm going to leave that reference point out there, and I'm going to use my hand tool to move over slightly so that I've got room to drag this out. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Option key, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag towards me, and you can see that this guy is now still in perspective. You would never know where to put him in that screen. You would know he needed to be bigger, but you wouldn't know how much bigger, and you wouldn't know where the crop of the image was, where it started to cut in his shoulders. However, he is still in perspective, and he is anchored in here, and it looks believable. Hit Command-Z to undo that. Perspective changes, I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of this. The perspective changes do not always have to be moving right or left. They can actually move directly to the camera and directly away from it. So to see how that works, again, hit Command-T to bring up transform. Drop this reference point right down by his knee. I've just come straight down with it, and it's still now on the horizon point. Now when I hold down Shift, Option, and click and push back, he goes directly away from the camera, but he does it in perspective. If I pull it all the way forward to me, he comes towards the camera, but he does it in perspective. So it's not like you always have to put these points to one side or the other and push them one way or the other. You can do it completely forward and backward, and this is still in perspective right here. Make sense to everyone? Okay, finally, great. Hit Command-Z to undo that. Come back to our layers palette over here. Turn off the city and turn on the train that's right underneath it. So I'm going to temporarily turn off the guy right here, and this is going to be perfect. We're going to end on this note right here. I'm going to turn off the guy right here, and I'm going to get rid of this guideline. This guideline is going to confuse me right now. So I'm just going to remember where the guideline, where the horizon line was for the guy. It was like right above his knees. So I'm going to come up to get rid of this guy, come up to the View menu, and come down to Clear Guides, and it'll get rid of all the guides for you. How can I find the horizon line of this image? I know you know, so I'm gonna to see if anyone else does, and then Katie, you're gonna tell me. Anybody have any ideas?
Are you on the horizon line?
I need to find the horizon line for this. Because again, that's what's doing all of this. You would have made a great shit earlier. No. Or wait, YMCA person? No.
It's the vanishing point.
Well, since Katie was first in there, because apparently a lot of you know, Katie, how would you do it?
You see where everything is combining into that space back there.
Yeah, what I'm looking for is converging lines here. And I've got converging lines here. Now, the way I typically do this is with the pen tool. It's the easiest. There's other people who will do this on a completely separate layer, and they'll draw it with the line tool or whatever. For me, the pen tool is simply the easiest one to do this with, because I just need to temporarily do this to find where the vanishing point really is. So to do this, I'm going to hit the P key to get the pen tool, and I'm going to come up here to the top, and you'll see I've got a converging line that's running right along the fluorescent lights here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start right here on that sort of like dark line. It's wherever the fluorescent light is being anchored to the ceiling. I'm going to click on this point right here, and then I'm going to drag all the way to the other side of my image, all the way over here, but then I'm going to bring it down so that it tracks that exact line that's running along the top line of the fluorescent lights. Is that working for everybody? And I'm gone way through my image, and I'm simply going to click a point out there, and it sets a point, and now I've got a line that's actually giving me that convergence right there. Then I can come all the way over here. I'm going to come up here to the top edge of the marble, the marble sort of separator, whatever the hell you. Jesus. Okay, I was an English major in college, and I went to Italy, and I lived there for 8 years, and I thought this would be great. I know my English is pretty well, and I'm going to now learn Italian instead. I just forgot all of my English, and I don't know Italian either, so I'm hopeless.
Do you mind just going back?
Nope.
So where did you start the line?
I will show you. So I don't have anything going on here right now, so I'm simply starting it right up here at this point right here. Right?
Uh-huh.
And again, I could actually start out here on the pasteboard. The pasteboard you can actually put points out on. But I'm simply click one point. That's all I did. And then I'm coming all the way to the other side of my image. You don't want to try to figure out something down here. You need to know where these things cross. So I'm going all the way to the other side of my image, but I'm using this as a guide to actually tell me where that line should go. So I'm simply tracking the entire line of fluorescence all the way down. Right? And I'm going to click another point all the way out here in my pasteboard. It doesn't matter. This is a temporary thing just to show me where my horizon line should be. Then I'm going to come over to whatever this marble thing is over here, and I'm going to click to set another point there. And then again, I'm going to go all the way to the other side of my image on the pasteboard. And then again, I need to bring it down enough so that I can actually get it to trace the whatever this marble thing is. So it's tracing that line right there. So that actually seems like a good trace to me, just like that. And I'm going to click another point. So where these two things intersect is my vanishing point, and it is also my horizon line. So I can establish it now. Simply come up to your ruler, click, and drag down, and this line, that guideline, needs to go right through that little point. And sometimes you'll have a hard time actually getting it to go exactly there. I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that, and I'm simply going to zoom into this. If you come way into this, you can get a much more precise placement of your guideline. And I'm simply going to drop the guideline where those two things intersect. Then I'm going to go to my path palette, and I'm going to throw my work path away. It's done everything it needed to do. I don't need that anymore. I now have the horizon line, and it's right there. Now, most of you guys suspected that was right where it would be, because this is a very obvious image that the horizon line goes through there. Does that make sense to everyone? Okay, go back and turn your guy back on. So I'm going to click the guy that's actually on, and I need to, again, set him on the horizon line. So to do that, I actually need to lift him up because this is where the horizon line is. It's right above his knees. So I'm making the guy layer active. I'm going to hit the V key to get the move tool, and I'm going to raise him up to where I know that that horizon line was. So, Henry, you thought he was big before. What do you think now? He's giant. He's taller than the fucking train. He is in perspective. However, there was a mismatch of when these were shot. You remember how low the angle was when the guy was shot? Right? So again, come up to the guy, scroll up to the guy, hold down your shift key and click on the mask. This guy was shot, whoever shot this was at or below his knees looking up. If you again click on this and drop this, the people who shot this train are standing on a stepladder looking down. There is such an extreme mismatch of these two, this guy will never be in perspective. So then you say, well, let's just make him smaller. We can make him smaller and let's see if it works any better. So we can do that. Again, with the guy layer active, hit Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm going to zoom back out just so that I can get to my control handles. Take this reference point, drop it right on the horizon line, hold down Shift and Option and click on one of these arrows. I'm going to click, one of these corners, I'm going to click on the right one and push this guy back in perspective. And as he continues back, it doesn't matter. Go ahead and say okay to that. It doesn't matter. Even though we've pushed him back into space, he's still taller than the train, which makes him like 15, 20 feet tall. So in this case, we can never get him in perspective. So now we need to try to get trickier about it. It will never be correct. The only way to really make this correct is to go back and shoot either of those two scenarios a second time. So you either go back and shoot the train or go back and shoot the guy. So how many people in this room are planning on doing compositing work for their final or for our semester-long project? Carson, I know you are. Are you doing green screen? Right? Yes. This matters. If you shoot and your perspectives don't match, if they are really, really out of sync with one another, you will never get this to fit. So we can try to make the guy seemingly better. So to make him seemingly better, I've got the guy, this layer is actually active and selected. It's the last thing we'll do. And I'm simply going to move him down so that he would be a more reasonable height for this train. So I'm moving him down. I'm looking at the door that's right next to him. So I'm going to transform him in space to the way I feel like he should be next to this door. Command T. You don't need to worry about doing this in perspective because he'll never be in perspective. I just need to make him smaller. So I'm holding down the Shift key so that I transform him in space correctly. And again, I'm just trying to get him next to the door and get him scaled about the size that he would be at the door. Because I have a pretty good idea of how big that door is. So I'm going to zoom into this. He's still too big here. So I'm simply going to, again, I'm holding on the Shift key to hold the link between width and height. You could just click on the link at the top. And you can simply use the scrubby slider to actually change his height. So I'm actually bringing him down more. And I'm trying to get him where I feel like he would be standing next to that door. And he is still too tall, so he needs to be made smaller still. And that's going to be about as good as I can get on this guy. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay to that. But you look at this and you know that there is something that is not right. And it's because he is not in perspective and he never will be. Are there questions about this? Okie dokie.
Does when you do perspective changing from the, I forget, so like instead of just transforming this layer, say we do like perspective or one of the other options.
Oh, like
is that a way to like draw someone's?
Yeah, no. That really makes that's a really good point, and that really has more to do with perspective of a lens and not the perspective relationship between two figures. So yeah, there are people who would say, well, conceivably we could raise the guy up. So you could actually try to do this. So I've got the guy selected. I'm going to hit Command T to bring up the transform dialog box. I'm actually going to change the transform from scaling to perspective. And I'm going to, because what I'm trying to do is get, instead of me being low looking up, I want to come up higher on him. So I need essentially his head and stuff to be coming towards me to make it bigger. You would simply click on these controls at the very top, and you would pull him in this direction. But what's happening is it is raising my camera level, but it's also making it look like he's falling over backwards. So again, it's a mismatch that you're just never going to fix, and no matter how hard you try. Are we good on this? Okay, guys, I'll see you at 1.